You can have your
Main event of the evening.
ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 9, Episode 18, Great Expectations, not to be confused with the Season 1 episode of the same name.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in this Great Expectations.
We open with Joanie and Chachi finishing rehearsing a song in the Cunningham living room. Chachi wants to start thinking bigger for their music career and fantasizes about playing Madison Square Garden.
10,000 people. $5 a head. That's,
$50,000.
right.
Marion comes downstairs dressed as a cowgirl and singing the titular song from Oklahoma, which her theater group is performing.
This is going to be the best musical that our little theater has ever done.
They do a production every year, but this time, Marion is the lead, and they have live chickens. Potsy shows up just as Marion leaves. He's meeting with Howard to be initiated into the Leopard Lodge. Potsy worries that there will be hazing like in fraternities, but Howard assures him there won't be, just leaving him naked in the woods.
We blindfold you, take away your clothes, and leave you out in the woods.
No way. No blindfold.
Once they're alone again, Chachi proposes to Joanie that they write their own song instead of only doing covers. At Arnold's, Fonzie and Roger are on a double date with two women. While Fonzie makes out with his date and then leaves with her, Roger makes awkward small talk with his,
I've been reading this very interesting book about a boy raised by wolves.
until she leaves so she won't have to hear him talk anymore. Later at the Cunningham house, Chachi criticizes Joanie's lyric writing, then tries his own.
You make me shout. You make me shout. You make me shout.
She compliments his rhyming shout with shout. Marion enters. The theater group isn't performing tonight because of a fire in their building, which killed the chickens, but did at least provide tonight's dinner. Howard comes home from the lodge carrying Potsy's clothes. They lost Potsy himself.
We dropped him off 10 feet from a gas station.
Marion makes him go back to look for him. Joanie remembers how Rogers and Hammerstein never wrote music and lyrics together, and proposes she and Chachi do the same thing.
I'll write the lyrics.
I'll write the music.
The next day in the kitchen, Roger laments to Fonzie how his date walked out on him in front of everyone, and asks what he's doing wrong. Fonzie asks Roger what he does on his dates, and upon hearing, calls him boring and tells him to keep it short and sweet.
I don't know, Fonz. I don't think that'd work for me. Does anything work for you? No. So good. Come on.
They join Joanie, who is working on lyrics, in the living room, and Fonzie has Roger practice on her. First his usual way,
Listen, there's a really fine film opening up at the Bijou Theater Saturday night, and
then in a more Fonzie-ish way.
Sheila, baby, your clothes are driving me wild, and that's only because you're in them.
And yeah, it's really uncomfortable considering that Joanie is Roger's much younger cousin. Then Fonzie invites him to a Falcon Bash tomorrow. At the bash at Rocky Baruffi's house, Fonzie and Roger say hello to Rocky, and Roger gifts him a bottle of wine, which Rocky drinks all of.
Got any more?
No, not on me.
Some guest.
Fonzie snaps at Roger to stop being such a dweeb, and makes him take his blazer off so Fonzie can rip the sleeves off of his shirt. Fonzie then tries to hook Roger up with his old flame Hillary, but she loses interest in him very quickly.
Did you ever spit for distance?
No, I don't spit.
Oh, yeah? So what do you do with your gum?
An attempt to flirt with another woman ends badly when she turns out to be Rocky's wife. Absolutely mangling a pickup line ends up working on another girl named Beverly, though.
If I told you I had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me?
And they go to Arnold's together. Roger starts losing control once she agrees to go back to his place, citing how she doesn't know him at all, and how he could be a maniac or something.
You sound just like my mother.
Yeah, well, mothers know things.
And ultimately, he ends the date before it can start. Roger admits to Fonzie he's not cut out for this, and Fonzie says that Roger is who he is, and that's not an insult. Then Roger goes to find Beverly, not for romantic reasons, but because she took his wallet. The next day at Arnold's, Joanie and Chachi perform their syrupy love ballad. The audience at Arnold's like it. The audience watching at home probably won't.
Thank you, Peter. That was Great Expectations. It first aired back on February 16th, 1982. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls return to Milwaukee for their high school reunion, and their classmates mistakenly think they are movie stars. CBS aired an epic 3-hour adaptation of John Hersey's novel The Wall, about a Jewish uprising in 1943 against the Nazis.
They suffered the same fate as the city around them. Life, death, hope, and betrayal. Until finally, they fought back. The Wall, Tuesday.
and NBC had a new episode of Father Murphy, in which a wealthy man's son pretends to be an orphan so he can enroll in Murphy's school as a spy.
He's like a spy in a house of Mo.
Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I'm very much intrigued by this rich child spying on Father Murphy's school, but also based on what I know about Father Murphy, they're going to find a way to make it sad and depressing. So instead, I'm going to watch the movie about the Jewish uprising. That sounds educational, at least.
The Wall sounds maybe a little too educational, so I'm actually sticking with Happy Days. By that point, I would have wanted to see Laverne and Shirley go back to Milwaukee for a while. Great Expectations was directed by Jerry Paris and was written by Andrew M. Horowitz, aka Andy Horowitz.
Suckers, they be saying they can take out Adam Horowitz.
This is his only Happy Days script and his only official screen credit ever, but he claims to have worked on sitcoms for most of the 1980s, including Happy Days, The New Leave It to Beaver, and The Jeffersons. He later became a teacher and a program coordinator at the Los Angeles School District. He's also worked as a research associate at Stern Executive Search. As for guest stars, Ken Lerner returns as Rocco Baruffi.
Rocco! Hey, Fonz! I'm glad you can make it.
And Teddy Siddall appears for the final time as Hillary.
Hi.
Hillary.
Technically, both of these characters debuted in home movies, though both Ken and Teddy had appeared as other similar characters previously on Happy Days. Peter, any thoughts on Rocky Baruffi or Hillary?
I was very glad to see them both again, even if the way that they acted and were treated by the narrative, respectively, made me uncomfortable. This episode has some issues with women, I think.
It definitely does, but I'm always happy to see Ken Lerner on the show.
Yeah, Rocky just drinking the entire bottle of wine that Roger brings right in front of him and then making fun of him for not bringing anything else is very, very fun. Significantly less fun is Rocky berating his wife for getting non-consensually kissed by Roger.
Why do you embarrass me in front of my friends? Didn't I wax the floor? Didn't I buy a plastic cake? Got the brother out of Mexico?
Let's move on to Amy Gibson as Alice, Roger's date at the beginning of the episode.
Thank you for the memorable evening.
Amy is an actress from Westchester County, New York, who's been appearing in films and TV shows since the 1970s. Most of her work has been on soap operas like General Hospital, Love of Life, and The Young and the Restless. But she's also appeared on One Day at a Time, The Love Boat, The Facts of Life, Vegas, and The Street. And I want to point out that both of those last two shows have an S that's spelled with a $sign. That's kind of cool. Her movies include Airplane, Reckless, and A Split Personality. She started losing her hair at a young age and eventually founded her own line of hair pieces for women.
Oh, that's nice.
So, Peter, what did you think of Amy Gibson as Alice?
Basically, all she has to do is act bored with Roger and immediately leave.
Just remembered I forgot to turn my water off. Oh, don't get up. I live nearby.
And she does that very well. It's a small role, but it's an amusing one.
Before she even has any lines, you can see her looking bored and distracted and fidgety, and then she has to make up an excuse to get out of Arnold's as fast as possible. And I thought that was one of the comedic highlights of Great Expectations. We also have Colleen Maloney as Buffy Baruffi.
Thanks, but I don't feel like it.
Well, maybe you feel like this.
Colleen was relatively new to the business when she did this episode. She worked in TV and film for about 20 years, from the early 80s to the early 2000s. Her small screen credits include Open All Night, Sledgehammer, Highway to Heaven, Married with Children, Erie, Indiana, Jag, Malcolm in the Middle, and Star Trek Enterprise. Her movies include Gary Marshall's Young Doctors in Love, plus Bachelor Party, Bad Dreams, Eve of Destruction, and The Ring.
One ringy dingy.
Peter, what did you think of Colleen Maloney as Buffy Baruffi?
Look, basically all she does in this episode is get non-consensually kissed by Roger and then berated by her husband for being non-consensually kissed by Roger, and it's super uncomfortable, and I felt bad for her, both the character and the actress. We do find out a little bit about her, namely that she chose the Baruffi home's outdoor barbed wire decor.
I love the outside of your house. I mean, a very interesting use of barbed wire.
Oh, yeah, my wife's idea. She got it from a necklace.
That's a fun little tidbit, but yeah, overall, it's not great.
But none of that can be laid at the feet of Colleen Maloney.
Yeah, it's not her fault. It's not her fault.
We also have Annette McCarthy as Beverly.
I can't wait.
Annette was an actress and musician who had a very interesting and unusual life. She was the niece of actress Joan Hackett, and in her youth was a babysitter for both Sofia Coppola and Zooey Deschanel. She appeared frequently on TV in the 80s and 90s, most notably as Evelyn Marsh in the controversial second season of Twin Peaks. She also appeared on such shows as Riptide, Magnum P.I., The Fall Guy, Beauty and the Beast, Night Court, and Baywatch, plus the 1985 cult sci-fi horror film Creature. At some point in her career, she was a singer as well and even opened for Twisted Sister. She semi-retired from acting in the 90s and pursued other careers, including executive chef and director at a sound studio. She passed away unexpectedly in January 2023, just a few weeks ago. Peter, what did you think of Annette McCarthy as Beverly?
She was a fun character. You get the sense that she thinks Roger is cute, and he seems like a fun date when he's not being himself. So you understand where she's coming from, and I like how she's frustrated with Roger when he starts saying that for all she knows he could be a maniac or something, and she compares him to her mother, and that was very fun. And it's also very fun that she apparently stole his wallet when he didn't notice.
I thought Annette McCarthy's performance as Beverly was very fun. Every once in a while on Happy Days, we get these tough-talking bad girls, and I think she has some of the more fun things to do in this episode, and I hope she got away with Roger's wallet.
It's what he deserves.
And for all we know, Roger might be a psychopath. How do we know that he's not like Ted Bundy? We don't, you know. And last but not least, we have Marcia Stern as Roxy, Fonzie's date at the beginning.
Say it again. I love it.
This is Marcia's only known acting credit. Peter, anything to say about Marcia Stern as Roxy?
She's yet another one of Fonzie's many one-off girlfriends, but she at least has the additional character trait that she likes it when Fonzie speaks Italian to her, which in this case is just the word buongiorno. So that's a fun detail.
And she wants Fonzie to say her name.
Say it with my name.
That was kind of a cool detail. I think Marcia has fun with this almost inconsequential little role. As for songs, Marion Ross sings Oklahoma and is later joined by Anson Williams.
Oh!
When the wind comes sweeping down the plain.
This is the title song from a 1943 musical by Rodgers and Hammerstein. It's also the state song of Oklahoma.
I mean, it pretty much has to be. What else are they going to choose?
There was a previous Oklahoma state song. It just was never popular or well known. At Arnold's, we hear My Boyfriend's Back by the Angels and Blue Velvet by Bobby Vinton. We've heard both of those before. The song of the episode is Time Turned Around, performed multiple times by Aaron Moran and Scott Baio.
Time turned around since I met you.
Like many of the original Joanie and Chachi songs on Happy Days, it was written by James Patrick Dunn and J. Elizabeth Bradley. This time, though, they were assisted by the legendary Jesse Frederick. Jesse went on to write and perform the theme songs for Full House.
Whatever happened to predictability? The milkman, the paperboy, evening TV.
Family Matters, and Step by Step. What did you think of Time Turned Around?
The first time I heard it, I genuinely thought it was the same song that was used for the theme of Joanie Loves Chachi, but no, it's a different song. It just sounds extremely similar because it's also a syrupy, terrible love duet.
Why do they keep giving these dirge-like ballads to Joanie and Chachi, Peter?
I don't know.
They're supposed to be young kids and having fun, and they're singing about finding their inner child like they're freaking teenagers. You're not finding your inner child again when you're like 17.
Time turned around, the child in me is found.
And at Rocky's party, we hear Wipeout by the Surfaris. We've heard that on the show before. As for cultural and historical references, this is the second Happy Days episode named for Charles Dickens' 1861 novel, Great Expectations, which centers around an orphan named Philip Pirrip, a.k.a. Pip.
You see, my parents are dead. Your parents are dead? God damn you, Seth Pip.
I'm not exactly sure what, if anything, this episode has to do with Great Expectations. Peter, your thoughts?
It does not have anything to do with the novel Great Expectations. I think they just chose the name because in this episode, some of the characters have great expectations. You know, Joanie and Chachi expect to write a great song. Roger expects to get more action on his dates by acting more like Fonzie. Marion wants to have a successful production of Oklahoma. And in the end, none of them really get what they want. But at least they have chicken for dinner.
Potsy, I guess, has expectations of getting his spots. That's kind of great.
Boy, I can't wait till I get my spots.
Oh, you got to become a leopard cub first, Potsy.
Chachi dreams of playing at Madison Square Garden, a multi-purpose arena in New York City used for both sporting events and concerts. There have been at least 4 Madison Square Gardens over the years. At the time of this story, which happens in the early 1960s, Chachi is referring to the 3rd Madison Square Garden, or MSG3.
MSG? Nice.
It opened in 1925 and closed in 1968. MSG3 was located between 49th and 50th Streets in Manhattan. The first time the Garden was not actually near Madison Square. It was demolished in 1969. One Worldwide Plaza now stands on its former location. And incidentally, depending on the event, the capacity of MSG3 was somewhere between 15,000 and 18,000. Ice skater Sonia Henney managed to bring 15,000 fans to MSG3 with her Hollywood Ice Review in 1938.
Oh, wow.
Sonia Henney's Hollywood Review takes over New York's Madison Square Garden. Everybody has a wonderful time except the poor chorus boy, who never seems quite able to catch up.
Would you have gone to the Hollywood Ice Review in 1938?
I mean, maybe. It's 1938. What else am I going to do?
Wait for World War II to start, I guess. Marion mentions Surrey with a Fringe on Top. This is another song from Oklahoma. It appears in Act 1 when Curly is trying to convince Laurie to accompany him to a box social. Surrey with a Fringe on Top has since become a jazz standard. I don't know why of all the songs in Oklahoma, that's the one that became a jazz standard.
I don't know. Why did My Favorite Things from The Sound of Music become a Christmas song?
Marion says she has the lead in Oklahoma. She is probably referring to the role of Laurie Williams, a feisty and independent-minded farm girl who I think is supposed to be in her 20s.
This year, I have the lead.
Oh, that's okay. I think you're young enough.
How old do you think Laurie is supposed to be?
Yeah, she's supposed to be like a young woman who still lives with her aunt and is in a love triangle with two dudes who both want to marry her. So maybe not the best casting, although I'm sure Marion will do the part justice.
I think Marion Ross can handle it. Joanie mentions a few songs that she and Chachi can perform as encores, including Twist and Shout and Sweet Little 16. Twist and Shout we've already mentioned. It's a rock song written in 1961 by Phil Medley and Burt Burns, a.k.a. Burt Russell. It's been recorded by many artists, but you probably know the versions by the Isley Brothers and the Beatles best. Sweet Little 16 is a Chuck Berry song from 1958 and is one of Chuck's biggest chart hits, reaching number 2.
They're really rocking in Boston and Pittsburgh, PA.
The Beach Boys' Surfin' USA is now legally recognized as a rewrite of Sweet Little 16.
If everybody had an ocean across the USA.
Justice for Chuck Berry.
Roger says he just went to a Sophia Loren movie. Sophia is an Italian film actress who became a major sex symbol of the 1950s and 60s. She started making films in her native Italy in the early 50s, but her real breakthrough came when she signed a 5-picture deal with Paramount, which may be why she gets such a flattering shout out in this episode.
Raj, where'd you go tonight?
Sophia Loren movie.
Roger says, I thought the end of the film was rather enigmatic, didn't you? Sophia Loren did a mixture of mainstream films and highbrow art films, so her movies might well end enigmatically.
She's European. They love their highbrow art films over there, or so I've been told.
Joanie talks about Rodgers and Hammerstein.
You know, I read somewhere that Rodgers and Hammerstein never wrote together. One wrote the music, and the other wrote the lyrics, and then he put it together.
Composer Richard Rodgers and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein II had the most successful writing partnership of the 20th century, with numerous Broadway hits in the 1940s and 50s that transformed musical theater. Rodgers had previously been part of another successful songwriting duo with Lorenz Hart, but Hart suffered from mental problems and started drinking heavily, leading to the end of that partnership in the early 40s. Oklahoma was originally supposed to be a Rodgers and Hart musical, but Hart was too ill to continue with it and couldn't write about rural life anyway. He died in 1943. But Joanie is correct that Rodgers and Hammerstein would work separately. In fact, Hammerstein's lyrics would be complete before the music was ever written. Peter, a lot of this episode revolves around Oklahoma. What is your history with that show?
Growing up, I basically was aggressively indifferent to a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein stuff. I developed more of an appreciation for their work later on, and a big part of that was both the fact that Oscar Hammerstein was basically the major lyrical influence on Stephen Sondheim, who I love a lot. I also read this really interesting book about Rodgers and Hammerstein and their work, Something Wonderful, Rodgers and Hammerstein's Broadway Revolution by Todd S. Purdom. It's really good. I highly recommend it if you're into the history of musical theater. And I also got to see the most recent production of Oklahoma when it was touring in Chicago last year. It was really good, really dark, Thumbs up.
I grew up with the music of Rodgers and Hammerstein. One of the few full-length albums that we had was the cast album for The Sound of Music, so I heard the songs from that over and over and over again. It was a big deal when the movie version of Oklahoma would play on television. And a few years ago, realizing that I had never actually taken part in any theatrical productions of anything, I actually performed in the orchestra for a high school production of Oklahoma.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
There was this high school in Chicago where they didn't have enough kids to be in the orchestra. So the band director asked people to be in it, and I did that. So I got to know those songs kind of inside and out. Moving on to Fonzie's conversation with Roger.
I gotta hear about your M.O. M.O.? Modus operandi, named after the guy that invented it.
Modus operandi is Latin for mode of operating. And it was odd to me that Roger would be unfamiliar with the very common abbreviation M.O.
I know that Roger's an out-of-touch square, but he can't be that out of touch or that square, right?
You gotta be short, sweet, to the point. You gotta say, baby, if I told you got a beautiful body, would you hold it against me?
If I said you had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me is a hit 1979 country song written by David Bellamy and recorded by the Bellamy Brothers.
If I said you have a beautiful body, would you hold it against me?
The title supposedly comes from something Groucho Marx said on his game show You Bet Your Life, which ran from the late 1940s to the early 1960s, so it's possible that Fonz heard it there. Peter, had you heard that expression before?
I had. I did not know that it came from Groucho Marx.
Opposable thumbs are mentioned in this episode.
Did you know that no other animal other than primates have thumbs? I guess that's why we never see them bowling.
Opposable thumbs are indeed rare, but they are not limited to primates. Chameleons have thumbs, as do lemurs, giant pandas, koalas, possums, and waxy monkey leaf frogs. Fonzie repeatedly compares himself to a Ferrari.
I'm a Ferrari. Put a little more of a boom in it, will you?
These are high-performance sports cars manufactured in northern Italy since the early 1940s, and Roger shyly admits to having been a Cub Scout.
I don't understand. I mean, like, what are you, some sort of Cub Scout or something?
Well, yeah, actually,
The Boy Scouts organization started the Cub Scouts in the UK in 1916. It's an organization for boys 7 to 12 who might be too young for the Boy Scouts. There are now Cub Scouts in
America, Australia, Poland, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Austria, the Netherlands, Canada, Ireland, and other countries.
Other observations this week. Marion's joke about the chickens is another example of dark humor creeping into Happy Days.
Fire broke out backstage and got the chickens. We won't be able to do the play tonight, but at least we'll have dinner.
What did you think of that joke?
It made me laugh. It was probably my favorite joke in the episode. I don't know what it says about me that I'm uncomfortable with jokes about sexual assault, but jokes about off-screen animal cruelty are fine by me.
It's a fine line, Peter, when they're trying to do darker or edgier humor. I think it helps to give a dark joke like that to Marion, who's the sweetest character on the show.
Oh yeah, Marion Ross delivers it beautifully.
As you mentioned, the scene with Roger pretending to ask out Joanie starts creepy.
I would like you to allow Roger to ask you out.
Fonz, he's my cousin.
And then gets worse. What were the writers thinking there, Peter?
They weren't. At least I hope they weren't, because if they were thinking and they didn't see anything wrong with it, that's a little bit disturbing.
This episode caused me to ask a couple of questions. Did consent exist at the time of the story in the early 60s? Was that even a thing?
It was coming along.
You wouldn't know it from this episode. It's basically just grab a girl, plant your face on hers.
And it's only a problem if she's already married, if she already belongs to another man, apparently.
And unless I missed something, there is no resolution to the Potsy story. I expected him to stagger in nude and disoriented during Joanie and Chachi's song, but that didn't happen at all.
I guess Anson Williams didn't want to do nude scenes. And I guess they couldn't have gotten away with that on a primetime show anyway.
Well, he would have been covered with like leaves and branches that he found out in the woods, and it would have interrupted that song, which would have been a great ending to the episode if they'd been singing this Time Turned Around song, and then suddenly Anson Williams, naked and afraid, staggers in to Arnold. Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Great Expectations?
Marion's cowgirl outfit, it's not an outfit that I would have chosen for Oklahoma if I was doing a production of that. Not aesthetically, but in terms of vibes, it reminds me of the outfit that Marty McFly was wearing at the beginning of Back to the Future Part 3.
Why, I didn't know the circus was in town.
Must have got that shirt off on the dead Chinese.
just like this ridiculous outfit that no actual self-respecting cowboy or girl or person would be wearing. The theme park version of what cow people wear. I kind of loved it.
Was it the same cowgirl outfit that she wore in the Lone Ranger episode last week?
It was not. That one was way more respectable.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
There are a lot of funny jokes in this episode, and I think it's paced pretty well, but man, this episode has issues with consent and women, and it drags the whole thing down.
My main problem with the episode was all the non-consensual grabbing and kissing of women that goes on and is not really even commented upon. This almost feels like 3 unfinished stories that are just kind of thrown together. They called it Great Expectations, but I would have called it something like a bunch of stuff that happened this week. None of it really seems to mean much of anything. I guess this is sort of a bonding moment for Fonzie and Roger, maybe, sort of. There must have been an episode where Richie tried to be more like Fonzie, right?
There were.
So they did that story with Richie and Fonzie, and now they're doing it with Roger and Fonzie. This episode didn't really bother me that much, but I think it's skippable. It doesn't hold a candle to the original Great Expectations from season 1.
Not at all.
They should have called it something else and not had it confused with that other, much better episode. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, we are finally getting a guest star that I have been excited for from the beginning, Mr. Billy Warlock in Hello Flip.
I cannot wait to talk about the career of Mr. Billy Warlock. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Ragu introduces Chicken Tonight simmer sauces, and suddenly everybody's saying,
I feel like chicken tonight, like chicken tonight, chicken tonight.
Choose from 4 new sauces. Each one's made with real vegetables and herbs, so you can make dishes like country French chicken and chicken cacciatore. Just brown the chicken, simmer, and serve.
I feel like chicken tonight, like chicken tonight.
New Chicken Tonight simmer sauces from Ragu.
Chicken tonight.
Oh, ew, ew.